Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of Sisto Says, powered by Design 2147, a New York City building and code consulting firm here in New York City. Today, I have the pleasure of having David MacKay from Kohler, Ronan. David, thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me. Looking forward to a good conversation.
Absolutely. And always a fun conversation, no matter what we talk about here in New York City, because it's always evolving. It's always organic. Something's always happening. So quick story about how you get here. Part of the show is always, how do I get my guests? Where do I get them from? So about a year and a half ago, I was invited to a little networking group, and I met a wonderful woman by the name of Pearl O'Du, who is the electrical engineer principal at your firm at Kohler, Ronan. And we became really good friends, and I tried to get her on the show, and she says, well, it's not really my thing, but David would love to do it. So here we are, David. Thank you for joining us. Pearl is a dear friend and always someone that I rely on for us to talk about our industry and what's going on, and she brings a lot of energy, and I really appreciate spending time with us. So you're here today to talk about a topic that this show gets a lot of coverage on, which is Local Law 97, and not really so much about the law itself, about, everyone asks me about local law. Said, well, so what do I have to do? When do I need to do it by? Oh, we don't have the money to do it. So you're going to bring a little twist today, not really from the engineering side of it, but more from the economic side of it. And we haven't done a show about that. So I'm really excited. I always put myself in the shoes of the audience, so I'm going to ask you some questions that I don't know, that they probably would like the answers to. So tell us a little bit about what you do at Kohler Ronan for clients, especially on the cultural and higher ed side, about proposing spending money to decarbonize or whatever the sustainability might be for that particular campus, and take us a little bit through how you make these decisions and how they make those decisions.
Yeah, gladly. Thanks for that great introduction, too. I have to say that Pearl is by far my favorite electrical engineer, and I am biased, but thanks again for having me.
You're welcome.
I think, one of the things that I'd like to get across today is, like you were saying, people keep coming up to you and asking, what do I need to do? Right. What do I need to achieve? How much is it going to cost? And those are very difficult, complex questions, especially in an environment that's changing all the time, New York City construction, depending upon the type of building that you're talking about, cultural institution or something like that with a longer time horizon, maybe a longer payback period. The building's going to be around a while. Versus commercial or tenant fit out. Those are all different aspects and how the client defines sustainability. Mm-hmm. Major impacts on financial resources, capital planning, and environmental performance overall. So it's how do you clarify that? How do you remove some of that uncertainty early on in the process, whether it's for an existing building or a new construction project? How do you help define the owner's project requirements, what success will be, what their goals are, and the most effective way to achieve that. And,
I was up at the SCUP conference up in Boston, and there was a gentleman there speaking on behalf of one of their state colleges, and he had a great point. He said when they go to raise money, for a new building, everybody wants to put their name on the building. He goes, but when we ask them to raise money to put in all new heating piping to go from old steam to upgraded hot water piping, no one wants to donate money because it's just not sexy. Yeah. And he made a really great point of it. And it seemed to follow that thought process from each seminar that Pearl and I kind of attended, that it was very similar, that it just wasn't sexy. It doesn't get the traction that someone who wants to build a new, research center is willing to donate hundreds of millions of dollars, but no one wants to donate a few dollars to rip the pipes out and put in new piping. So, your job, I would assume, and I say assume because I don't know, but I would guess is that you're going to meet with the finance people as well as the engineering people on the owner's side to say, hey, this is the law. The law says by 2050 we need to achieve these goals, but there's things we can do now. And if we do them now, I'm going to show you that it makes sense. And is that really what you do, is trying to make sense of the money that they spend versus what it looks like for the students, what it looks like for the staff, what it looks like for them complying, but making sure that you can put it all together and put it almost like on a spreadsheet and say, this is what it's really going to look like.
Yeah, exactly. It's that initial concept screening, helping to define things and helping to guide the project in the right direction, depending on when those decisions need to be made. And it's can be rather challenging.
Sure.
Cultural institutions, museums, things of that nature where you have preservation environments, mission critical type operations
Sure.
where you need to maintain special temperatures and humidity requirements, and you're maintaining those 24/7. You can't do some of the energy efficiency things like the setbacks of the temperatures or shutting machines off overnight. You have like artwork preservation to the point where
and that you make a great point there, David, that we think of sustainability of, oh, it's an apartment building, change the light bulbs, take all the equipment out, put everything, make it all electric, and you just decarbonize the building. But how about those other uses that you just brought up? And that's a tremendous point. You're in a museum, you have artifacts, you have things that need a certain temperature and a certain humidity. How do you achieve that? So how do you do that?
it's a challenge. It really is. But there's different things that you can do. Whether it's humidity control or temperature control. It's not really just best in class equipment. It's things like turn down ratios and being able to get the energy when you need it, and to operate efficiently at part load as well.
A big part of it, right?
And one thing to really define too is there's a very large difference between efficiency and just using less. Efficiency is meeting an end requirement with the least amount of resources possible.
Right.
So going ahead and just turning the thermostat down isn't necessarily efficient because you're not getting the same level of heat, you're not getting the same level of comfort.
And then when they need the comfort, they turn it all the way back up, and the machine is working twice as hard to get to the place that they feel comfortable. So
Exactly.
Finding that balance, even as a homeowner, you great point. Yeah, it's too hot in here, honey. Oh no, it's too warm in here, honey. Put it up, put it down. But it's a constant battle in my house with my children and my wife, right? So you could imagine when you have end users in a museum where hundreds of people are coming through, but yet there's an engineer somewhere sitting in the back looking at a computer going, oh my God, the humidity dropped so much. And we have this, and all these people are in here, but I got to, it's difficult.
It is. And then, that's another source of uncertainty from the engineering side too, is, as a design engineer and consulting engineer, you're going in with a set of assumptions. You try to clarify those with the owner. The owner's representative or the client is going to say, 70 degrees is fine. Go ahead and you design everything. You get the energy projections and you think everything's good. You go back and you commission or you look at things maybe a year down the road, and without fail, there's significant temperature adjustments that have gone because you can't keep everyone happy all the time. And that affects the energy performance. It affects the local law 97 potential penalties.
Right.
And it's
a challenge. That's also something that's been a big topic is AI. So I'm not a data nerd, but I like data, right? And when you look at AI and how it's going to change the way we do things and the way we look at things, there's still the human side of it. And that's, going to a lot of seminars and talking to a lot of engineers and architects, around the country, not just here in New York, in the Northeast or down in Florida. We're still humans.
Yeah.
Our skin feels the humidity. Our skin feels the temperature. And just because the AI says do this, it doesn't mean that the person, the end user, is comfortable.
Exactly. And you talk about AI, and data and analytics in general. And I just like to remind people that it is data and analytics is not the end all and be all. There's a lot you can do with it, but maybe just think about the stock market. All right. Any financial institution is going to tell you past performance is no indication of future performance.
Correct.
Because that's the reality of it. We can't predict the future. We can kind of narrow things and run things under different scenarios. But the data in and of itself, it helps and it's informative, but there's inherent limitations to data.
Of course.
You can't turn it into something that it isn't in order to answer questions that you can't define.
Without a doubt.
But at the same time, there's a lot of potential for AI or machine learning, and it has had some impact in the industry. If think back to something like the transition to BIM, building information modeling and Revit.
That's another thing everybody talks about.
15 years ago, when it was first kind of coming out, I was young, naive. I thought it was going to be the most transformational thing in the world, and to a certain extent, it was. You had that collaboration, and you get that information exchange. But the quality of the use of the tool falls back on the people themselves as well.
Correct. Because it's still, no matter how much BIM wants to coordinate where a plumbing line's going to go and where a waste line's going to go and where electrical outlets are going to go and all of that, and it does all, it's still got the end user side of it. And someone still has to be there to see it all together and verify that this is what I want when it says this is what I should want, or this is what it's suggesting we need, but it doesn't mean that that's what it really is. So I'm gonna give you a little rapid fire questions, or maybe a general question, because I think that having this show about the economic side of it versus just most engineers that have come in and say, okay, by this date we need to do this, and by that date we need to get rid of this fuel and we have to be electric, and I'm tired of hearing about that the infrastructure is not there, so I'm afraid of this or afraid of that. I'm going to ask you different questions, and my questions are going to be, okay, I have a building, it's running on fossil fuel, it's a museum, we need all of these things. When you project these costs, do you feel that equipment and technology is going to change over the next 5 years to help with this whole sustainability and decarbonization? Are the manufacturers going to be able to get better optimization out of a unit to do more than it's been doing for us over our lifetime?
I'd like to think so, but there are inherent limitations with the technologies. Physics is physics, and at the end of the day, I think we'll get there. But 5 years in terms of this industry is pretty short. It's when you think about maybe you're at a 2-3 year lead time for some electrical equipment in terms of switchgear and distribution.
Right. Crazy.
And those supply chain pressures, things like the refrigerant changes, and, the 410A phase out, and now you can't get certain types of equipment in a timely fashion. Yet you have old equipment. Exactly. So it's, to think that we're going to make an order of magnitude type change in efficiency of equipment, it's not feasible.
Well, one of the things that a gentleman was on, and he does boilers, and of all the podcasts that I've done, our boiler podcast is like number one. And it's amazing how many people are really interested in a boiler, and we talk about some great topics on this show that I love the guests, but boilers is a big one. And one of my questions to him was, so we talk about oil, we talk about gas, and we never talk about an electric boiler. Is it coming, and when is it going to get here? Because everybody wants one. And you just made a great point about physics. Can an electric coil be able to do what a fuel could do by actually heating a tub up and boiling the water? Can electricity do that for us? And efficiently and effectively, right? So there's a perfect example that's a game changer. That means every residential house can get their boilers pulled out and just put in, without going to a Mitsubishi type unit, but, a quick conversion. Is that part of what sustainability is in the future for the next generation?
Yeah, I think so to a certain extent. You look at water source heat pumps and anything that's going to generate the hot water. I mean, right now, to efficiently do it, you're really looking at temperatures around 125, 130 in
Right.
terms of the supply water. That's online with, say, really efficient condensing natural gas boilers. So it's, your radiators, your terminal units, your
Right.
existing stuff, it works around those same temperatures. If you're talking about, a fuel oil boiler or, something a little bit older that's operating at 180 degrees, it's very challenging to get
Yeah, 'cause it's
electricity to
much
operate
hotter.
that way.
Yeah.
An electric resistance boiler, I mean, they got them. They're very efficient. They're almost 100% efficient. But the thing is that input fuel is roughly 3 times dirtier, depending on how you want to measure it.
Right.
It's 2-3 times more expensive,
Right.
depending on how you want to measure it. So it's efficient, but those inputs cost a lot more
Correct.
in terms of energy and emissions. So it's from a existing building standpoint, if you've got a dual fuel, fuel oil, natural gas boiler system that's, an old workhorse that's working like a champ and you're tuning it well, you're keeping up on the maintenance. From an, an environmental standpoint, ripping that piece of equipment out and then go sourcing something internationally and then doing all this extra construction when there's useful life remaining in that equipment.
Well, that's
also with the
always-
dual fuel idea of resiliency,
Right.
being able to switch back and forth.
Right. If
rather
it goes
than just
below
being
10
on the
below
electric.
10 degrees, you get off the gas and you go to oil, and you only burn the gas when it's above it, or vice versa. However they do it these days, I never understood the concept, but it's there, right? And yet, maintenance is a big part of sustainability. It's funny when we talk about it, or we talk about it at the bar, right? After that scup, and we're talking about sustainability. And to me, it's just like it's a category. But when you start to talk about sustainability in a museum versus a residential building versus a dorm versus a life science building versus a school classroom, they all have such different parts of sustainability in terms of your challenges. Everyone presents a completely different challenge. There's no, oh, well, it's simple. Just pull, like I said earlier, just pull it out and put in electric. Well, it's not that simple. Because if it was that simple, then just upgrade the infrastructure and everybody goes to electric. It's just...
Yeah, all we would be installing is VRF systems. That's
Exactly.
it. There would only be a VRF market, but
Right,
that's not
and
the
that-
reality on the ground.
And that's not the reality. That's not the reality. So
So it's like going back to what you were saying about the museum and the boiler situation,
Right.
it's if Con Ed steam, something of that nature, if you're on something that might not be, the gold standard in terms of future sustainability, because you got to remember this electrification is reliant upon future decarbonization of the grid.
right.
That's a major assumption that's built into all of this.
Right, that
Right
they-
now, today.
They're using way too much fossil fuel to make the electric.
Exactly. And it's worse than if you were using the fossil fuel on site to make the heat. Because you got all the losses
they're
in
just
the
making it in one place. We're making it in a million places.
Yeah. So you got that distributed generation, and it's.
So what's do you see? And I know in New York City it's tough, but geothermal is a big discussion on college campuses, and so a very interesting conversation the other day with someone who was in charge of a facility, a large institution, and their campus always loved the idea of geothermal, but they didn't have the space. Mm-hmm. And back then, whenever they looked at it, it was all or nothing. We're going to rip the old steam boiler out. We're going to take the heat exchangers out. We're going to take the distribution system out, and we'll put a whole geothermal, and it'll be like a heating plant and a cooling plant for the entire campus. And that was the mindset. But now, new engineers, new concept, new tax incentives, right? Because there's always tax incentives and programs that these universities can get into of doing. If they have a building at the end of the campus that has some green area, they're using that green area to make small geothermal systems to maybe take care of one building versus the concept of all or nothing for the whole campus. Are you seeing that as a concept that may take? I know New York City's tough because we don't have the room, but there are in the outer boroughs places where this can happen and in certain type of facilities.
Well, I'd like to say, even in Manhattan, Sisto, there's some really exciting things going on with geothermal, just in terms of drilling technologies, smaller drilling rigs where you don't have to have clear skies above.
Right.
Being able to, get into the basement of a building and poke holes and below. Recently, it was just over the last summer, New York State went ahead, and there used to be a limitation where you can only drill down to 500 feet
Right.
for a
And then you
geothermal
had to go get
system.
like a miner's
fracking.
permit.
Yeah. Basically, they would think that you were fracking, no matter
Right.
what you were drilling for, if you went over 500 feet.
Right.
So New York State went ahead and put an exemption in specifically for closed loop geothermal wells to now you can go below that depth. So what does that mean? You go deeper, you get more surface area, you get more capacity out of that
Right.
well.
You're going to get 55-degree water for a longer period of time, right?
So, you double the length, you double the capacity.
Sure.
With the fancier drilling technology, the more precise drilling technology, you could get these boreholes closer together. So you get the density, you get the potential of the geothermal capacity up.
For it to become more efficient.
For it to become more realistic as a resource.
Ah, gotcha.
You know what I
So
mean?
because of the capacity, you can do more with it, whereas
Yeah.
before you couldn't because the pipes were too far apart. There wasn't enough volume. It just couldn't really work in that
Yeah, the
small area.
capacity for what you were given out of that geothermal was a drop in the bucket compared
right.
to the heat rejection or heat extraction
It's like
that
putting
you
one
need
little
to do.
solar panel on your roof. I mean, it's,
Yeah, same idea. But with some of these increases in drilling technologies, with some of the advancements in other technology, you spoke about tax incentives. The IRA, did open up quite a bit in terms of geothermal. There's something called the 48 ITC tax credit,
Okay.
Section 48. We don't want to get too deep into IRS and tax code,
Right.
but that's specific for geothermal. You can get pretty close to up to 40% of a geothermal system in terms of a tax credit.
wow.
No,
Just, again, partnering, when the government, this show talks about that a lot, the 421A, now the 485X, when New York City, especially New York City, partners with private developers, they have always achieved incredible things. Affordable housing, our park system. You go on and on and on about so many great programs that we have. And I think it's super important that if we want to see sustainability take this quantum leap, the government has to help the developer. He has to help the museum to make that change. He has to help the homeowner to get solar panels or a geothermal system, to work for them. So those tax credits play a vital role in my view, for these things to actually happen.
Yep.
Because they are expensive. We didn't really talk about the cost, but where is a geothermal system that we talked about 25 years ago compared to a geothermal system today? The efficiency got better, but did it get a lot more expensive? Did the price actually come down? Certain systems, they come down as they get better. Some of them go up as they get better. So, where does geothermal fall in the economics of it?
It's tough to put a straight number on it, but I've yet to find very many technologies that are cheaper. TVs, that might be about it.
Right.
But in
there's
general,
inflation there too.
There's base inflation, then there's cost escalation on top of that. So it's you get the general price increase, but it's not a cheap system by any means.
No,
It's the
but
most.
it's a
It
very
really is the
efficient-
most expensive, but it is also the most efficient.
Yeah.
And the thing is, once you poke those holes in the ground, they're going to be there and they're going to be working well beyond my lifetime or your
Right.
lifetime.
That's the durability of them is.
Yeah.
Is
So it's a tough upfront expense. It's a logistical challenge, particularly if you're talking about drilling and the subcellar of an existing building or how you sequence that from a constructability standpoint. But once that investment's made, you can draw off of it for a long time.
right.
Just to circle back to the IRA, one of the things that they did do was they made it so that like 501c3s or nonprofits, some of these cultural institutions, the museums that we were talking about before, they couldn't access something like a tax
No.
deduction or a tax credit because they didn't pay taxes.
Because they didn't pay right, and
But that's revised now.